based off the nature of this being a profile piece, most of my questions are going to be focused on your career and particularly your goals. What have been some of the goals that you have made going into the Congress? What and how have they succeeded? And what goals do you have for the future?
Yeah, and let me just kind of a little bit, to talk about kind of my pathway here and kind of how I got here, and then be more than happy to talk about some of the goals, some of the things that we're working toward. That I grew up in Brandon, graduated Brandon High School back in 1988, ended up at Mississippi State University with a degree in accounting, and then there from law school. Graduated from Ole Miss Law School in 92, but my last semester of law school, I actually interned in the local DA's office, and kind of fell in love with the prosecution, working with law enforcement, going in the courtroom, fighting for good and justice and truth and the American way, all those good things. And so I was able to find a way to stay on there in the DA's office when a young lady on our staff went out on maternity leave. And then when she came back, I was actually able to lobby the Rankin County Board of Supervisors at that time to kind of help create a position that I was able to serve in, kind of an entry-level position there in the DA's office, low-paying job, but it's what I wanted to do. And so then was able to kind of take that from an entry-level staff attorney, first an intern, then an entry-level staff attorney, to an assistant DA, to later a deputy DA, and then ultimately had the opportunity to serve 3 terms as the elected DA for the 20th Judicial District, which encompassed Rankin and Madison County. And really, that's kind of where I felt like that I would kind of stay. I really had no desire to seek any additional political office. I like what I was doing. I like working with law enforcement. I like going into the courtroom and arguing cases and questioning witnesses. But when Greg Harper, who was in this seat before me, Greg and I were friends. He lived in Pearl, grew up in Jackson. Greg was also a practicing attorney. He did some work in some of your local city municipal courts, and so Greg and I had gotten to be friends through work, through church. Had gotten to be friends through the work that we did together with the Rankin County Republican Executive Committee. And so when Greg had served in Congress and decided to come home, he reached out to me and asked if I had any interest in serving. And really it was something, Elijah, that I had never thought about. It was not anything that had ever registered to me. But based on that conversation, ultimately decided to run if Greg didn't, and was fortunate enough to be elected. And so then coming up as a new member of Congress, one of the first things you have to do is you have to put in a request for your committee assignments. What committees do you want to serve on? And just because you request committees, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be granted the ability to serve. It all depends on the size of the committees. Some committees have more members than others, the number of openings that are on the committee, and things of that nature. But one of the committees that I really had a desire to serve on was Homeland Security. Based upon my prosecutorial background, I really felt like that was a committee that I had a good foundation for, and that I would be able to come in very quickly and make a difference on that committee. And so I was able to get on that committee, and you talk about goals. What were your goals? One of my first goals was I wanted to serve on Homeland, and then ultimately wanted to serve in a leadership position on Homeland Security. And so was blessed that I have the opportunity to do both of those. I'm in my 3rd term on the Homeland Security Committee, and I currently serve as the vice chairman. So I'm the 2nd highest ranking member on the Committee of Homeland Security. Mark Green from the state of Tennessee, a good friend of mine, who actually grew up in Monticello, Mississippi, before leaving Mississippi to go to West Point. Mark Green is the chairman, and I serve as the vice chairman, which gives me the ability to help make policy. When you're talking about Homeland Security, I think a lot of times we think of the Southwest border and Customs and Border Patrol and ICE and those agencies associated with that. But there are a lot of other agencies that fall under that Homeland umbrella. FEMA falls under that, Coast Guard, the Secret Service CISA, which deals with cybersecurity. And so, not only are we responsible for protecting the physical borders of the United States, but also the cyber borders, as we see cyber attacks have increased by whether they be nation states, individuals, or in some cases, criminal organizations who are seeking to use the internet for evil. And so had the opportunity to serve on that committee, and again, have been blessed to move up in a leadership position. So those were some of the things that I wanted to do. When I came here, I wanted to get on committees that I felt like that I could help serve Mississippi, that I could be a champion for, that would impact our state, but not only serve on those committees, but hopefully be able to rise up to a position of leadership to have more influence on the day-to-day activities that those committees oversee.
And can you tell us a little bit about some obstacles you've run into as you try to achieve some goals in your congressional career?
If you look at obstacles, sometimes, one of the biggest obstacles that we face is trying to garner a majority of members to pass legislation. Some of the legislation that we pass has bipartisan support, which means both Republicans and Democrats support that. Other legislation is going to be strictly Republican supported legislation only. Earlier in this year, we passed H.R. 2, which was our big Homeland Security bill. It passed overwhelmingly with Republican support. I think we either had one or two Democrats who joined the legislation once it got to the House floor. But that was legislation that would not only provide additional resources to the southwest border, but would also change policy. And I think we've seen over the last, particularly 3 years under the current administration, we've seen an explosion of immigrants come across the border. And we felt, as the Republicans now in the majority, when Republicans took over the House in January, that we needed to address that. And so we had to work very, very hard to come up with legislation that all Republicans could support. There were certain things that some Republicans said they could vote on, some things that the other pieces that other Republicans were more hesitant. And so when you're talking about drafting legislation, it's very important that you be able to count numbers, that you know how many people are going to support it, how many people are going to oppose it, and that you draft the legislation in a way in which you can get that passed. And so that's one of the things when you start talking about challenges that we face. Challenges are at times having everybody maybe to put aside sometimes their personal agenda and to be able to vote for something for the good of the country.
And tell us about any future goals that you have.
One of the things that I would like to, in another committee I have the opportunity to serve on and just began service this Congress, is on the Appropriations Committee. The Appropriations Committee is the committee that writes the spending bills for Congress that funds the government. There's actually 12 different spending bills, everything from the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, state and foreign ops, ag, veterans. All of those pieces of legislation fund our federal government. And one of the things that Republicans have worked hard to do over just this last Congress is to write spending bills at a lower spending level than we've seen the last several years. We have a $33.5 trillion national debt, a debt that has grown exponentially over the last several years. Some of that was COVID-related spending. They were reduction in tax revenue because of COVID, but we've seen a huge increase in our national debt. And so one of the things that we're trying to work together as a group of Republicans is to bring down spending, to bring spending back to that pre-COVID level, to try to reverse that spending curve, so that we're not leaving a huge debt for people like you and others, young people who are just be coming into their careers, that you won't be burdened by this huge crushing national debt that we've seen accumulate, particularly over the last decade or more. And so that's a challenge for us to be able to bring that spending down, but also make sure that we're doing things such as investing in our veterans, investing and our border security, investing in the Department of Defense. We've seen recent international events. We know that we have war in Europe right now with Ukraine and Russia. In the Middle East, we've seen the events in the Middle East recently with Israel and Hamas over in Gaza. We know that tensions are high in the Far East with Taiwan and China. And so we've got to also be aware geopolitically what we do here in the United States and how we spend our tax dollars also is going to have an effect really with nations across this globe.
And going back to your education and your law career, what has been some things from that time in your life that you think has prepared you for your time here as the congressman?
Well, one of the things is being able to read law and see how that law will be applied. As a prosecutor, we didn't have the ability to write the law, but we would take the law that was written by, at that time, our state legislature, and then we would look at fact scenarios and see how certain fact scenarios fit the law, and did the facts in question result in a violation of the law? And so as I'm reading legislation now, that we are going to be proposing, either our office or maybe legislation that we've been asked to sign off on, I can look at that legislation kind of with that mindset. All right, if this legislation were enacted as written, would it accomplish the necessary purpose? And so a lot of times as we're going through and as we're introducing legislation from our office, and as we're drafting that, there'll be different drafts of legislation that we'll be passing back and forth. My staff will get with me, we'll get with committee staff, we'll get some proposed language, and then I'll read that proposed language, and then I may have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 edits based upon how I would apply that if the legislation in question became law. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think my legal career prepared me for was to be able, as we're conducting hearings in our various committees, as we have witnesses come before our committee, members of Congress are given 5 minutes to question witnesses. And that was something that I was used to doing. I was used to being, as an attorney, questioning witnesses in criminal cases. Well, now I can take that same skill set that I learned and practiced for 25 years in the courtroom and apply that in those committee hearings as we're questioning witnesses, whether it be appropriations, Homeland Security, whatever the topic may be. I'm able to rely on those skills to make me hopefully a more effective communicator in those committee hearings.
And speaking of committees, you serve on 3, that's correct?
Correct. We talked about Homeland Security, talked a little bit about appropriations, and also serve as chairman of the Ethics Committee. And so the Ethics Committee is kind of in charge of making sure that the institution as a whole polices itself. And so we have jurisdiction over members of Congress and then staff members who work in Capitol Hill. And so whether it be a personal office or in some cases a committee staff, those are the people that fall under kind of our umbrella of jurisdiction. This is my 3rd year to serve on the House Ethics Committee. There was a young lady from Missouri who was actually the lead Republican on the committee late last year, passed away in an automobile accident. And so I was asked to kind of step in and be the lead Republican. And then when McCarthy was elected Speaker in January, he asked me to serve as the chairman of the Ethics Committee. It's kind of a uniquely divided committee in the fact that it is the only equally divided committee, the fact that there are 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats. Generally, the party in the majority has more seats on a committee than the party in the minority. And so this Congress, with Republicans being in the majority, we have more seats on every committee except ethics and the Democrats. But this committee has historically been equal representation, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. And then for us to be able to move matters through the Ethics Committee, since it is equally divided, requires bipartisanship. There's got to be at least 6 votes to move anything forward. So if it was 5-5, of course, that would result in a tie and nothing would be able to move. So it is actually one of the few committees where you see bipartisanship come into play for us to be able to accomplish anything of any significance.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the district work, and then we'll get into some of the last couple questions. We'll deal with some of the current events, but tell us a little bit about what y'all are working on in district work.
Yeah, be happy to, and just kind of explain a little bit about how my staff is. So, of course, I travel back and forth from the district to DC. Generally, I'm home every weekend. Occasionally, votes require me to be in DC. But normally I'm home on the weekends. But I have a staff in the district, and they're responsible for a couple of things. One is making sure that they're out in the community visiting with elected officials, local leaders, community leaders, that we have a pulse on what's happening in the district. And then we also have individuals who do constituent service work. So if an individual has some sort of issue with the government, maybe they're not getting their disability benefits like they think. Maybe you're a veteran and you're not getting the care you need at the VA hospital. Maybe it's someone who needs a passport and they're having trouble obtaining that. Just a number of different things. We have people who do that constituent service work, who kind of stand there in the gap, who, if you will, even though we're not being paid as lawyers, but we're representing them as they're kind of trying to navigate what can often be a difficult process, and very excited about some of the work that they're able to do. Some of my staff are able to do to help people that have those issues. And so we're constantly doing that. You know, a couple of big issues that we're working on right now in the district. One is over on the eastern side of the district in Meridian, where there is the 186th Air Refueling Wing, which is an Air National Guard refueling wing based there at Keyfield and Meridian. They are flying an aging platform. They fly refueling tankers for the Air Force. They fly the KC-135. When I was over in Meridian a couple of weeks ago, Elijah, had the chance to tour one of their planes, and the plane was built in the 1950s. So an aging platform that's been in service for some 6 decades. And even though the plane is well maintained and has had some improvements and overhauls over the year, really is a platform that the Air Force is trying to move away from. The Air Force is about to roll out to National Guard bases the KC-46, a different refueling plane, but a brand new refueler that has increased capability. And so what we're trying to do as a federal delegation, not just me, but our other representatives and our 2 U.S. senators, is we're trying to position Meridian so that they can get this new tanker platform. We believe if we're able to get the KC-46s to Mississippi, that extends the life of that mission there in Meridian for at least another 50 years. It would be something that would be a generation changer. In addition to that, the new platform would bring in additional families. That would be a blended mission where you would have both active duty and National Guardsmen working together on that mission. And we anticipate that there'll be roughly 100 families who would be moving to Meridian. And so we look at that and the fact that it would continue the air refueling mission there, but it would also have a big economic impact to East Mississippi. Another project that we're working very closely with is Mississippi State University. They're in the district. They're kind of the northeastern corner of our district. The Raspet Flight Center. The Raspet Flight Center is a UAV, unmanned aerial vehicles center of excellence. And they do a lot of work in the Homeland Security Department of Defense world. And they have the ability, really like no other place in the entire country, to be able to help design and test and improve unmanned aerial vehicles, or what we commonly known as drones. And so there's great drone research that is happening at Mississippi State University. And again, a lot of that is government related. We know that our federal law enforcement agencies often use drones. We've seen the Department of Defense, our military, the use of drones, how we've seen that increase in military combat across the globe. And so Mississippi State is uniquely positioned in the research that they're doing, and we make sure that we're trying to connect Mississippi State with opportunities that they can assist. So those would be 2 things that I can think of right off the top of my head that we're doing specifically as it relates to Mississippi. And I will tell you that we work closely with the rest of the federal delegation, both our senators and our three other members of Congress, that we're constantly working together for maybe infrastructure improvements, flood control, those things of that nature, where there's often going to be a state-federal nexus. We've been very blessed that we've not had, of course, a big hurricane season, but we have had tornadoes that come through and have caused damage in Mississippi the last year. And so we're working with FEMA to make sure that Mississippi has the resources that we need to be able to recover from that storm damage. And so those are just kind of some of the examples of some of the things that we're currently doing to assist people back in Mississippi.
And the last just couple things that I have to do with the current events. Can you tell us a little bit about an update of what you know, where we stand with the speaker?
Yeah, as we currently stand today, and things change minute by minute, hour by hour, but our speaker designee for the Republican Party is Jim Jordan. Jim has gone to the floor twice to have votes on the House floor to be elected as speaker. I have voted for him both of those occasions, but he's fallen short on both votes. We are anticipating that there will be an additional speaker's vote, maybe later today or tomorrow, where we will once again go back to the floor as an entire Congress. So Republicans, Democrats coming to the floor. And the magic number of votes that someone has to receive to be elected speaker is 217. You have to have a majority of the entire Congress. We know that none of the Democrats are going to vote for Republican nominees. So as Republicans, we have 221 Republicans, if I'm not mistaken. So that means that the speaker can only, or the potential speaker can only lose 4 votes. And so we're in the process right now of trying to determine when we go back to the floor, when that next election will be. But at this point, Jim Jordan is our speaker designee, and until he decides otherwise, he'll be the individual that will be on the floor that the Republican Party will be nominating. There was also discussion today about, do we give additional legislative powers to the Speaker pro tem? When the Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, was removed from office by the motion to vacate, Speaker McCarthy was able to set forth a list of 5 individuals who would succeed him if he were to be not removed from office, or if he would have become incapacitated. Maybe he became sick, or maybe he was he passed away while in office. There is a list that the Speaker prepares, and Patrick McHenry was the first on that list. And so at this time, Patrick McHenry has very limited authority, and the really only authority that he has at this point is to lead the House through the election of the next Speaker. There's been some talk about, do we want to expand those powers where McHenry on a limited basis could actually bring legislation to the floor if we wanted to vote on, say, a resolution to support Israel and condemn Hamas. We can't do that right now without a speaker. But if we empowered the Speaker pro tem to bring that forward, then we as an entire body of the House of Representatives could vote on that. And so that's the discussions that are ongoing right now. We're going to continue to try to elect a speaker, but if we are unsuccessful in doing that over the next several days, I think that you'll continue to see more and more people talk about empowering the Speaker pro tem on a limited basis to move legislation through the House of Representatives.
And lastly, I just wanted to ask about, once we do get a speaker elected, or y'all able to pass legislation, what is on the agenda to get accomplished? Anything to do with Israel or the federal budget, anything like that?
Yeah, both of those will be top priorities. Of course, I think the first thing that we will vote on would be the resolution supporting Israel and condemning Hamas. That we know that the administration is working with the Israeli government on some sort of financial aid package for them, particularly military aid that they may need during their war with Hamas. And then you mentioned the appropriations or the spending bills. We will continue to work on those. There are 12 appropriations bills that Congress must pass every year. So far, we've passed 4 of those. So there's 8 additional spending bills, 6 of which are out of committee that we need to get to the House floor, and we need to be able to hold a vote on those bills. Because ultimately what we vote on in the House, then we've got to marry those bills up with the bills in the Senate and come to some sort of conference report, conference bills that can be voted on by both the House and Senate to keep the government up and funding. I think the current continuing resolution that was passed, we're now down to about 30 days in that continuing resolution. And so somewhere roughly around November the 15th, government funding runs out. So it's important that we get back to work so that we can keep the government open and that we can pass the spending bills that we are constitutionally required to do by law.